First, I realize that probably every time I'm filmed with Bobcat TV, I have the same shirt on. I want everyone to know that I have more to my wardrobe than this shirt and a pair of jeans. But it's the first Wednesday of the month, and every first Wednesday, we wear our kindness shirts. We are going to get different kindness shirts, so eventually I will have the same shirt, but it will be different. But anyway, it's our first kindness Wednesday that all the faculty are wearing their shirts, and it's really to express to our kids that we really want an environment of kindness and inclusion, and that's what we work for. So, and that's going to be part of what we speak about today, and I'll share that with you later. It'll be about emotional wellness and how we at HCC are supporting and making that a really top priority. But before, I also would like to welcome Vince Greco. Vince has been a community member, a former board member, and just a great supporter of the Barham Hill School. So it's great that Vince is here. Thanks, Vince.
Thank you.
And Dr. Lamia is here. Thank you, Dr. Lamia, for being here with us. And Dr. Kaltnecker is here, but he's here not just to be supportive, but he's also here because he has the initial presentation that he's going to speak to us about. Title I funding, is that correct, Tim? Okay, so, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I ought to watch the previous year's tapes as well to make sure I'm not wearing the same suit. So let me tell you the purpose of what I'm doing today. So there's two parts of my presentation. First is mandated by a federal act, and I'll explain that in a moment. In the second part, I figured since I have your attention, we could talk about the bigger picture ideas of the initiatives in the district. So that'll be, I think, the more interesting part to you. But the first part I have to do. So the first part is for a Title I grant. We get funding from the federal government. It's called Title I funding. So it's based on need in the district and the federal government started with No Child Left Behind, and now it's the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind, provides districts some financial support. We get a very small amount, but because we get any funding, I have to present to every school building the explanation of what the title grants are. Yeah. So what is title? It's federal funding, and we're required to do these presentations. So funds are designed to be supplemental support for students in need and to support students meeting the standards. And we get about $48,000 annually, so it's a very small amount. Some districts get millions of dollars. So I see in those cases that it is important to explain to the community the purpose, but I do want to let you know I do spend several days in the summer working on the grant application and thinking about where to put the funds. Any amount of money I will take from the federal government if they're going to give us free money, because it's less money that we have to ask the taxpayers for. In addition to Title I, we get about $48,000. We also have something called Title II, which is about another $50,000. So overall, it's $100,000, which can go towards some of these areas, and these are past areas where we've offered support. Academic support for students. That takes place after school or in the summer. We offer a program for students who are falling below proficiency on the state tests. So we put a lot of our funding into that. Also professional development for teachers in new curricular areas and ways that they can address meeting the needs of all students, particularly students who are falling below. So those are some of the areas where we've put the funding in the past. So another required aspect I have to talk to you about is how you can be involved in our schools. Since you're here, you know that you can be involved in the principal's coffees and come to those to get information. We also have a really active PTSA. You can always get involved in our PTSA. You can get involved in the Education Foundation. We love our Bobcat TV volunteers, and we thank them all the time for getting involved there. So that's another area you can be involved in our schools. So there's lots of committees, and I think because you're here, you probably know you have access to the principal and assistant principal, and you can always be involved in our schools, and we encourage parent involvement. And I believe that ends that portion. So first, let me just pause and see if you have any questions on the federal funding program called Title I. Now I've done my duty for the federal government, so they won't take me away in handcuffs. But what I will do is, at the end, I'll send around a sign-in sheet because I have to have evidence in case they audit us that you were here. Because I did get in trouble, and that's why I'm doing this carefully now. And by trouble, they just said I have to be doing these presentations at the school level every year. So what I want to talk about now is some big picture ideas of the district's initiatives and give you a sense of the things we're working on district-wide and why those things are important to us. I'm going to give very big picture. Maybe I'll hone in on a little bit of detail, but if you have questions about anything, just stop me and let me know that you have questions, because I don't want to get real involved unless you're real deep, unless you're really curious or interested in something. I want to start with our mission statement. We go back to our mission statement a lot because this is what drives the work in our district. So if we can read this for a moment, in an environment of mutual respect, the Byram Hills School District and its community will provide students with the means, the knowledge, and opportunity to excel in order to become productive and responsible citizens of the 21st century. It's a big statement, and we talk a lot about what does that mean to us and what does that look like in the classrooms. How are we preparing students to be responsible and productive while also making sure they excel in these areas? It's a big statement with a lot going on, so I'm going to talk about some of that. But here's a question that's been driving us in the last couple of years, is thinking about the fact that we are a district where we have high standards for students. We are a district where students really excel, and we have high expectations, and we get our students into some of the best colleges in the country. In fact, we get almost 3/4 of our students into the top 12% of colleges in the country, which is pretty phenomenal results. So with that, we want to maintain our rigorous academic program. At the same time, we know that if students aren't emotionally healthy, they're not going to be open to meeting the highest bar that they can meet academically. So how do we keep that balance? I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think we can do both, that we can create students that are emotionally well while also making sure that we have high standards and keeping students to that high standard. And that's the question we keep grappling with. So I'm going to show you a slide that has a lot of different areas on it, which are the big picture initiatives that we're working on right now. I could talk about some of the details of those, but it'll give you a sense of how we're trying to deal with both academic rigor and emotional wellness. There's a lot on this slide. I'll walk through a couple of the aspects. On the left are sort of the big picture areas we're focusing on. So we start with student empowerment. One way we can find that balance is by making sure that we're giving kids agency and authority to make their own decisions. Now that's hard because they're kids, but we also have to give them some choice in the classroom, some choice in their school environment. You'll see that here in the middle school, for example, with Kim working with students and student government so that they can make decisions about, for example, their cafeteria and having tables in the cafeteria. So that's what we mean by trying to empower students to think in ways that get them to be making some decisions, some ways that they feel they have ownership of their learning environment.
Tim, I actually just wrote down those words because I love the agency and authority and ability. Those were, so.
Yeah, and that's things that you're working on here, and we're doing that a little bit in every building. Of course, it's age appropriate. You know, how you have second grade students making decisions is very different than a 16-year-old at the high school, for example. So we don't mean, you know, they're all making the same decisions, but it has to be age appropriate and developmentally appropriate. We also have our 21st century skills focus in these 5 areas, which we've been working on that for the past 5 years and embedding those into the curriculum. Our instructional focus has been shifting, and this is also related to keeping a high bar academically, but also making kids lower the anxiety and stress in the classroom by shifting somewhat of what we're doing in the classroom. So it's a little different than maybe how I learned social studies, for example, where I went to my class, the teacher lectured for 45 minutes, I took notes, eventually I took a test on it. That was my experience in a lot of my academic upbringing, K-12. However, what we're shifting now is you can go into a social studies classroom and be presented with a really challenging, interesting, real-world problem. And then you have to grapple through that problem, and in the process, you're learning the content. So we're trying to shift that focus. It makes kids active learners, it keeps the academic rigor high, but also kids feel they're focusing on problems that are of interest to them, they're doing it with their peers, they're talking with their peers, so it's somewhat social, which helps the environment as well. So that's again an example of balancing the academic rigor with the wellness of students. We also have 2 curricular areas that we're focusing on. STEAM has been something we've focused on for about 6 years, and we now have a really great comprehensive K-12 STEAM curriculum. And we're also now looking at the flip side in the humanities on global competence. I'll talk more about those 2 on the next slide. We're also looking at leadership. We want kids to be leaders in the world. We know they will be. Our students will be kids, or adults that will go out into the world and make a difference. So this is one leadership model that we're exploring this year. Leadership grew out of our global competence research that we did over the past couple of years. So we're working on how we help build leadership in students, and this is one model we're working with now. And finally, getting to our character education, which is, to me, is really the bedrock of wellness for students. Our character education principles have been in place for about 2 decades. They were developed through the site-based teams, and it's respectful dialogue, respect for self and others, and service and kindness. And we spent many years, probably close to over a decade, working on integrating that into our schools. And that's why you have our character education programs in all of our schools grew out of the site-based team. And also I'm working with principals this year to be integrating explicitly social emotional learning skill sets. We have a framework for social emotional learning that we're integrating into our schools now. That's also coming down from the state, but we started doing that work before the state started to develop the framework. That gives you a very broad, big picture of a lot of the initiatives, but I'm trying to connect them to how we're answering that question about how we balance wellness with academic rigor. And one more slide is on these 2 initiatives. So we've had a comprehensive STEAM curriculum that we now have in place. Last year we started 4 new STEAM courses at the high school. That was, is this someone's, whose child is this? There you go, right to your children. that was amazing experience for these kids. This comes from a summer camp this summer that our robotics teacher did for 5th through 8th grade students. And it was just a phenomenal experience. And that was an example of our STEAM curriculum, getting them excited for our new STEAM courses at the high school. Last year we introduced 4 new STEAM courses at the high school. That was our most challenging area, to figure out a way to bring STEAM to the curriculum at the high school, because typically high schools are departmental. They're sort of silos of departments, and it was challenging for us to think of a way to integrate that. But we did come up with several amazing courses, and last year's feedback was phenomenal for kids who participated. So we're very excited about going into year 2 of our STEAM curriculum. And global competence has been something we started researching a few years ago, and as a result, our 3 chairpersons, Dwayne Smith of English, Jen Layden of Social Studies, and Melissa Stahl of World Languages, created what we're calling the Global Scholars Program at the high school. It's a 3-year sequence for students to study global issues, starting in 10th grade. Students don't have to enter in 10th grade. If they do enter in 10th, they can stay with it for 3 years, and we have a 3-year curriculum. But if you're a senior or a junior and you decide you're suddenly interested in global issues and want to take the course, you could enter it in the year 1 program. So it's meant to be accessible and flexible for kids at any point. We're in year 2, so we started year 1 with about 70 students who signed up. We have another 30 students who signed up this year. So we're now building the year 2 curriculum, and we're very excited about that piece, and the feedback from kids has been really terrific. And one more thing, partnerships. So we're really proud of making connections with universities that are doing cutting edge research and that are high-performing universities. We've been partnering with the University of Michigan for a while at our high school. We've worked with the Depression Center. That was about 5 or 6 years ago, working with the Depression Center, when we started to recognize we had to do something about student anxiety and stress at the high school level. We've expanded that work to the Department of Education, who is now working with our math department to study the changes we're making in mathematics and how we can maintain the high rigor with wellness. And they're actually studying that at our high school math curriculum. We're partnering with Stanford University and Challenge Success, which I know you've heard from Kim, and if you're attending high school principals' coffees, you're hearing it from Chris Walsh as well, where we brought them in last year to survey our students, and now they are helping us understand the results and do some changes in our school that help with wellness. Kim and Chris can certainly talk about the details and the elements of what we're learning about that survey. We're partnering with NYU in our math program, and these are 2 organizations we're partnering with Global Competence. They've been, they're the frameworks we use in designing our Global Competence courses, and they have amazing resources and great thinkers in that work. I think that is the end of my presentation. So that gives you a really big picture of the things we're doing. We're very excited about this work. And I hope you're seeing the impact with your kids. And I could see from some of you with the STEAM curriculum, you are seeing that with your kids.
So I always want to start off by highlighting the essential question. I know you've been to back to school nights, you've seen it. It really burned in my brain. So there are the 4 parts to it. It's active learning, it's risk taking, it's rigor, and then it's a healthy mindset. And those 4 things are what we work towards and embrace at the middle school. What I want to talk to you today about is our commitment to emotional wellness. When we engaged with Challenge Success last year and we received that survey, we had a steering committee that really fleshed out what we thought were the real high points of what we needed to give attention to. We were able to then identify and focus our work for this year. So for example, the committee made some recommendations, like they suggested that we consider screen time. There's good and bad screen time. How can we address that as middle school? And these are big questions, so we're taking time to address them. Scheduling, overscheduled students and children, and the partnership and how we can address that. Community communication, how we work as a partnership together with you, and also how we work as a partnership with our students. And how do we bring them in so their voices are heard, and we listen and learn from them what their needs are. Those are critical components, and so that drove a lot of our work this year. So our work is to establish and foster a community approach where students, parents, and teachers are invested partners. And what I want to speak about is student voice circles, Challenge Success, and the team emotional wellness goals. I'm doing it the easy way by touching the screen. I can see it and I have a little more control. I want to start with the emotional wellness goal. This I'm most excited about. So in middle school, there are teams. There are grade level teams, 6A, 6B, and then there are also other teams that for the longest time they were called non-academic or specials. The truth is they're teams. They just operate, instead of by a similar group of kids, they operate as a team to support a content and students at the same time. For example, world language is a discipline team. Physical education is a discipline team. So the middle school is built on teams. And that attention to our students is primary, and it's so important. This year, we took a look at the recommendations from Challenge Success, and we asked each team to just focus on one emotional wellness goal. And so Angela and I met with every team. We heard their initial thinking about what they wanted to do, and then we fleshed it out with something called the theory of action, which I have to thank Tim for. He helped me utilize it last year, and I loved it so much that I had everyone do it. And sitting down, I would like to show you an exam. Oh, I have to, hold on. Our theory of action would say, if we implement voice circles and provide students with a partnership in developing a community. So that's our big idea, that every teacher had a big idea, their big goal. Here are the practical steps. Then teachers will be given feedback by students to inform instruction and team practices. And teachers will have an increased capacity to support the emotional wellness of their students. And then this is our big idea. So what's the impact on our students? Well, students will have an opportunity to express feelings, thoughts, feel validated and heard, and partner with us to find solutions. Now that was our big theory of action picture. Every team went through this, and examples of this would be, one team said, I want to work with our children to help them understand their learning styles best. In order to do that, we are going to collect data and provide students with feedback. And one example, the very first week of school, they collected data that they took a look at the kids, and they said who did their homework and who didn't. They tried to kind of parse out what the reason why was, and some of it was organizational. So from that data, they went back and worked with the students and kind of allowed them to realize, okay, your learning style, what is it that you needed more of in order to complete this homework assignment? It could have been that it was on the Google Classroom, it could have been that they needed something written, but those are the steps that all the teams will be taking. And in the end, their idea will be students have the tools to understand what they need to learn better. Students have, out of that one goal, students have more free time. Because if they can manage their time better, then they can have more free time and be less anxious. So that's an example of how we're doing work as a team to set specific goals. Physical education, some of them were a little bit like embedded in who they are. Physical education was that they were going to commit to teaching their students how to be mindful in the moment. And it would show up in many different ways in physical education. And then they described the steps, and the goal would be that students take those tools and implement them or bring them to academic classes as well. The arts, they want to have students understand, even if you're not an artist, how art can help you express yourself and understand yourself better. They outlined opportunities to do that, and in the end, they had it that students, again, would be able to be more cognitive of how they were feeling, be able to incorporate art into some of their expression, or be able to go to an adult and talk about some of their feelings through this more self-aware component. So that's the emotional wellness goal, and there's going to be parts or times during the year that students and faculty will be giving feedback, so they can adjust some of their wellness goals according to the students' needs and the feedback that they're getting from their students. Okay, second thing is that we want to utilize Challenge Success. This is an endeavor, a partnership that we have had with Challenge Success. Mr. Ancona and I were able to go to a leadership workshop this summer. It provided us with many tools, and we started to implement areas that we thought were most impactful. For example, in grade 6, feedback that we learned was that how important transition was, and that we saw that in grade 6, sometimes the social dynamics with groups, it's trickier. They have more freedom. They can sit in the cafeteria where they want. It's more stressful, the social component, especially the first half of the year. So we have incorporated a new guidance class in our mini course. It's an 18-day class. It goes into our mini course cycle where the guidance counselors each take a portion of that and work with students to learn about who they are, how to practice mindfulness, how to utilize the mood meter that they have used and really come up well-versed from WAMPUS understanding. You know, where are they in terms of how they're feeling and what does that mean? We also are going to incorporate in Superintendent's Conference Day both an opportunity, and I'm going to say it now, at night on October 17th, we're going to have Challenge Success come and speak to us in the evening. So we invite you to come be there with us. We also are going to have Challenge Success come and speak to our teachers, again, to have their improve and increase our ability to understand how to support student wellness. We also, I don't want to fully commit to this, but we really are thinking about having a homework reflection month that incorporates parents, teachers, ourselves, where it isn't that you have to, but we would utilize a faculty meeting to use some of the tools about looking at our homework practices, having students look at their homework practices, having parents look at their child's homework practices, and it isn't in judgment, it is actually just the biggest component that we found with Challenge Success. It didn't place blame on anyone, not that there's blame to be placed, it more was a conversation that we all started having about our children, and that we all are invested in their well-being, so we all need to take a look at how we interact with our kids and what we're providing for them, and how we can make changes or support what they're doing. And then we are going to continue to have the steering committee to oversee the work. And the last thing I'd like to talk to you about is the student voice circles. They are taking place, they took place yesterday, they took place the day before, and they're also going to take place 3 days next week. And what we were asked to do, we have an organization come in. We learned about them from their work with the high school and the Student Leadership Board. And it is to have our students listen to one another, learn from one another, and lead with one another. This isn't a one-time deal where our students are going to come and they go through this process and then it's over. The hope is that this builds a sense of community where our kids feel empowered, and it isn't the loudest child or the quietest child, or everyone has their voice heard because they're learning how to listen and appreciate one another. The hope would be that as the year goes on, I was told to stand over here, it's helpful, so I have to remember to do that. As the year goes on, we are going to incorporate voice circles into feedback for our team goals. So we would then have primary focus questions that students could provide teams with feedback about their emotional wellness goals. We would like to have voice circles during lunch, and those topics would be generated by our students, and they can participate or not. And at times we could possibly do it random, and sometimes if we want to have students involved and they want to dictate what the voice circle is, they can be involved in that as well. And the whole idea out of all the voice circles is that they understand they're part of a community. They reflect on a component. Now in this case, our kids' experience was to have them feel that A, they're part of a community that has similarities, they're not alone, it has differences, and they sometimes might have a different experience, and to become more aware of it, and then say, okay, I appreciate and respect one another, so what is it that we want to do as a result? So this work, the students then, let me explain a little bit more. They were in groups of 8. So about 80 students attended and went into the gym. There was a facilitator and teachers and teaching aides and custodial, or no, secretarial staff, they were all part of this because we want everyone to be trained in the voice circles. And they sat together, and so out of the 80 people, we had 10 groups of 8. And they initially had to go through an exercise where it said, your favorite blank, and it could be my favorite meal, and you have to explain your favorite meal to everyone. You had to, at one point, introduce yourself by saying my name, what the meaning behind your name. And you go around a few times, and there's something to hold, so there is a symbolic component that no one else talks except the person holding the ball. Because part of what we also learned was sometimes when you're in a conversation and you're listening, you're not really listening. What you're doing is you're trying to think about the next thing that you want to say in the conversation. So part of this was to teach kids how to listen, that you couldn't speak when anyone else was talking. You weren't going to ask questions till it was your turn. So, you know, there's a varied range of successes in terms of their experiences, but it gave us really a foundation in terms of an experience of building community. They all then went into the back gym and did a non-verbal exercise where they stepped, it was called step out of the line. And you didn't have to do it, they were explicitly told. There's some dynamics about, you know, supporting students to make sure they felt comfortable, and they could step out of the line and they were given different questions. And at the end, they were told, if you didn't step out of the line when your answer was yes, you can step forward now. And it was amazing to watch people, teachers and students, step forward, look around, no, I'm not alone, or I'm a part of this, or sometimes, wow, I might be a little bit more unique. There might be only a few other people stepping forward. And that was an experience that then they came back and they had to talk about their community and say what were certain recommendations they might want to make about the HCC community, and then what were some commitments as a group of 8 they felt like they wanted to suggest and make. So I wanted to give everyone just maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes to walk around and take a look. Now some of them, there was one that said they want nap time. Yep, and these were, we didn't control it, and teachers, I was part of one of the groups, and it was so hard not to manage the group or hold the ball and tell them a lesson that you wanted them to learn from this experience. But you really were one of many in that, and everyone's voices, teachers could be called by their first name if they elected to, which was a little bit edgy, but we wanted to make sure, and teachers could choose it. They could say, I want to be Miss Lapple or Miss L or Kim, but that was up to the teacher and the students, and it was trying to, again, to lay a groundwork that we're in this together, and this is a partnership to improve our school. This is what it looked like, actually, in the gym, and then the back gym was where they did the whole group instruction. And the next step is really there will be a focus group that these facilitators will run on the very last day of this Voice Circles, which will be next week, and we're going to choose students to, again, give us feedback. What do you want out of this next experience of Voice Circles? What is it that we should do moving forward? I received some feedback even about that there were some really hard topics for some students, and that got us thinking, as with the guidance department and the teams, how do we support those students who might have realized something's a little bit more uncomfortable for them, but they're not ready to talk about it, or they have no avenue to talk about it, or they need to go home and talk about it, but we need to make sure those things happen. So the facilitators will work with a smaller group of students, much smaller, for some feedback that we will utilize for next steps moving forward. And then we will incorporate Voice Circles into our work. I'm going to use it in my faculty meetings. The department chair people were involved also, so we're hoping they'll include it in maybe their assessment of some of their goals or working with students. And it can just be used in classrooms where teachers do this a lot as it is, when students work in group, that there are understandings. Well, now it's almost more foundational, that there are understandings about how to sit in groups and how to listen to one another. Another important component that we're doing is we're trying to move our recognition program away from just the honor roll. The honor roll is really important. It's one of those 4 components of our essential question. But there are other really important components of what we think students should be doing at the middle school. Basically, we're going to have a Bravo board outside of the main office. And there are going to be 4 categories that we are going to celebrate our students. Academic rigor, the honor roll is not changing. It all stays the same. We are going to recognize students who achieve high honor or honor roll. We are going to notify you. and celebrate their work, as we should. That is part of the rigor and the essential question. We also are going to look to catch students for the emotional wellness component who have acts of kindness, who have done something that a team or a teacher want to recognize. We're going to ask teachers to pay attention to students who value trial and error, and they're trying something new, and despite maybe not doing it right the first time, they continue at it. So again, we're going to ask teachers to recognize it, and then we're going to ask teachers to give us feedback and recognize students who are active in their class. They'll go above and beyond. Maybe they give some direction to a teacher quietly on the side about a different way to do something, whatever it would be, that they're more active in either how they learn or they're thinking outside the box and enriching the experience for everyone. And we have stickers, and these stickers will be designated one type of sticker for each of these achievements, and we'll be giving them to the students when they're recognized. We also have started something called the HCC Journal. Feedback from students and faculty told us that we shouldn't do this for 8th graders because if it doesn't start in 6th grade, they might think this is a little sillier, or this is the beloved journal now, and we gave this to all our 6th graders. What we want them to do is, and every faculty member has this, we want them, as they start to achieve and be recognized for different things in middle school. Have you ever seen on a football, when you watch a college football game, there's the stickers that go with your tackles or certain things that you've done. So inside their journal, so it can be more personal, they would start keeping the stickers in their journal. And it would be just for them. These journals should be kept at home or in their locker or somewhere safe. And then little by little, hopefully then in 8th grade, they will be able to look back and see ways that they were recognized. And so we started this in 6th grade. We are going to recognize 7th and 8th graders, but just not including the journal. And the other hope would be that faculty starts to utilize the journal. For example, the 6th grade could ask them to give feedback about voice circles. The 6th grade also has changed some of how they're doing exploratory to incorporate that wellness goal, and they're going to incorporate the journals in that wellness goal, where students sometimes can reflect on a component of what they're being supported to grow as individuals. And hopefully when they leave in 8th grade, they have something where they can look back at their growth, they can look back at where they were recognized, and they can feel good about the rigor, the active learning, the risk-taking, and their wellness, their acts of kindness. I was thinking how I wanted to end this, and it was that I hope you know that Mr. Ancona and I will feel very supported by the district administration to allow our kids to become real community members in the school. And we are looking for continual opportunities to provide them with leadership opportunities. That doesn't mean the person who raises a hand the most or speaks out the loudest. It's also the students that want to engage in SAL, but we also know that there should be other opportunities besides that. So we're thinking about doing a voice circle group that can help lead the direction of the voice circles. So we want to make sure that we provide as many opportunities to your son or daughter to engage in this community that they feel a part of, they feel valued. And the truth is, that's why we're here, is to make sure that they flourish and they feel empowered and they learn and they're happy and they're safe. So always feel free that you can come and speak to me or let me know anything that's going on. But know that that's what you get from us, is a commitment to our kids, to your kids. So thanks for coming.